Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling study strategies, ones that actually work. You know, that feeling of just complete information overload, especially when you're like facing down a mountain of textbooks or prepping for some huge exam.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've all been there.
We have.
Yeah.
We're going to be exploring some seriously cool techniques to boost your learning, your reading AD, your memories.
That's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and we're going to be basing this deep dive on Tony Buzan's book, The Buzan Study Skills Handbook.
This is such a great book.
So think of it as like your brain's personal cheat code.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great way to put it. And Buzan's book is just packed with practical advice, and it's all based on how our brains actually work,
Yeah.
instead of working against them.
Yeah.
And he starts by addressing something that I think we've all probably experienced. At least I know I have study fear.
Oh, yeah.
Have you experienced
I'm
that?
big time.
Yeah.
Yeah, just that feeling of dread when you realize just how much you need to learn.
Yeah. It can be so overwhelming.
And Buzan actually calls those like pre-study procrastination tactics. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
He calls them displacement activities.
Like what?
You know, it's like suddenly you have this urge to like rearrange your entire sock drawer or...
Yes. Or deep clean the bathroom.
Yes, instead of hitting the books.
Exactly. And he points out that a lot of this negativity towards studying stems from outdated study techniques.
Oh.
You know, the ones that just aren't effective. So we end up kind of fearing the process because we don't have the right tools.
It's like we're set up to fail almost.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
So to empower us, Buzan dives into just the incredible potential of our brains.
Okay.
He talks about the 5 core functions of our brain.
Yeah.
You know, how it receives information, how it stores information,
Okay.
how it analyzes that information, how we control how we use it, and then how we output it.
So is that essentially like the learning process broken down?
It's a great framework for understanding it.
Yeah.
And you know what's fascinating is that Buzan completely debunks the whole left brain versus right brain myth.
Oh, tell me about it.
You know, that idea that some people are purely logical and others are purely creative.
Right. Like you're either an artist or a scientist.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can't be both.
Right. But if you look at geniuses throughout history,
Yeah.
like Einstein,
Uh-huh.
I mean, he was a brilliant physicist, but he's also a passionate violinist.
Right.
Or Da Vinci,
Yeah.
who excelled in art science engineering. I mean, it's clear that we're not limited to just one side of the brain.
We're not just these two-dimensional beings. Yeah.
Exactly. And we can and should engage both sides of our brain
Okay.
for optimal thinking, memory, and recall.
To use the whole thing.
Use the whole thing. Yes. And that's a core principle behind Buzan's Organic Study Technique.
Okay, BOST. Now that sounds like a complete system.
It is.
How many steps are we talking here?
It's an 8-step process.
Yeah.
And it's designed to really optimize how we learn.
Okay. Break it down for me.
Okay, so the first step is browse.
Browse. Yeah.
And it's like taking a quick tour of the material,
Yeah.
just skimming through it to get a feel for the structure and the scope.
So kind of like browsing the shelves at a bookstore.
Exactly.
You're not reading every book, you're just getting a sense of what's there.
Perfect analogy.
Okay.
The second step is time and amount.
Okay.
Which is all about setting realistic study goals for yourself.
Yeah, I can see how that's crucial. You know, to avoid feeling overwhelmed.
Right.
It's probably better to have shorter focus sessions than to try to cram everything in at once.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, so now step 3 is where things get really interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
This is the 5-minute mind map.
5-minute mind map.
Yes. So this involved jotting down everything you already know about the topic
Okay.
before you even start studying.
So it's like you're activating your prior knowledge and creating mental hooks for the new information to attach to.
Exactly. You're priming your brain for learning.
Oh, I like that.
The fourth step is asking questions or defining goals.
Okay.
And this might seem really obvious,
Yeah.
but I think it's often overlooked.
I can see how that would be important, though.
Yeah.
Having a clear, mission, you
Yeah.
know,
Yes.
for your study session,
Mm-hmm.
it would make a big difference in terms of focus and retention.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. So now the next 4 steps, these dive deeper into the actual learning process.
All right.
Step 5 is overview.
Oh, overview.
And this is where you really focus on the headings, the visuals, and the key sections of the material.
So it's like assembling the edges of a jigsaw puzzle first.
Yes. Get the framework in place
Okay.
before you fill in the details.
Makes sense.
Step 6 is preview.
Preview. Okay.
And this is where you go a bit deeper.
Okay.
And you focus on the beginnings and the ends of paragraphs, chapters, or sections.
Oh, I've heard that's where the most important information tends to be concentrated.
It's a good strategy.
Then comes in view. in step
All right, so
7.
view. Oh, this is where you really fill in those remaining gaps in your knowledge.
So you've gotten the overview, you've previewed the key points,
Right.
and now you're like really diving into the details.
Exactly. And Buzan actually suggests that you leave the most difficult parts for last,
Oh, that's interesting.
because he says your brain will continue to work on them subconsciously even when you've moved on to other things.
So it's like it's still simmering back there.
Exactly.
It's still working on
I
it.
usually get stuck on those tough parts and end up like wasting time.
I know what you mean.
So the final step,
The 8th and final step is review,
review.
which is all about repetition and reinforcement
Okay.
for long-term retention.
So you go back and you revisit the material
Uh-huh.
at spaced intervals,
Mm-hmm.
like a day later, a week later, and so on.
Exactly. That spaced repetition helps to cement that information in your memory.
Really make it stick.
Make it stick, yes.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these steps fit together to create like a comprehensive system.
But how does BOST actually address those study fears that
Right.
we were talking about earlier?
Well, it's about working with your brain, not against it. By understanding how your brain naturally learns,
Yeah.
and by breaking down the process into these manageable steps, studying becomes less intimidating and more effective.
So it takes the speariness out of it.
Exactly.
I like that. I'm already feeling more confident just hearing about it.
That's great.
But before we dive deeper into BOST, I'm curious about another technique that Buzan mentions.
Yeah.
Speed reading. Is it really possible to like double or even triple your reading speed without sacrificing comprehension?
That's a great question. And, it's a topic that sparks a lot of debate.
Yeah.
Buzan argues that it is possible.
Yeah.
And he offers a range of techniques to support this.
Okay.
One of the simplest is using a guide like your finger or a pen to direct your eyes across the page.
Right.
This helps to maintain focus and rhythm.
So instead of letting your eyes wander all over the place,
Right.
you're creating a more structured visual path.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He also introduces the double line sweep.
Double line sweep.
Yes, where you train your eyes to take in larger chunks of text at once.
Now, I'm a bit skeptical about that.
Yeah.
Doesn't that risk missing important details?
It's understandable to have doubts. But the key to speed reading isn't about simply racing through the text. It's about understanding how our eyes and brains actually process visual information.
Okay.
So by expanding our visual intake, we can potentially read faster without sacrificing comprehension. Think of it like expanding your peripheral vision.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting way to think about it. So you're training your brain to see more in each glance.
Exactly. And Buzan also reframes those daydreaming moments.
Uh-huh.
Those moments that we all experience while reading.
You mean when you suddenly realize you've been staring at the same paragraph for 5 minutes without absorbing anything?
Exactly.
Yeah, we've all been there.
He argues that those moments are actually natural breaks that our brains need. The key is learning how to recognize them and gently redirect your focus back to the text when you're ready.
So it's not about eliminating those mental breaks altogether,
No.
but rather about managing them.
Exactly. It's about working with your brain's natural rhythms.
That's a much more forgiving way to think about it.
Right.
So speed reading is about being more strategic with your visual focus.
Yes.
And understanding your brain's natural tendencies.
It's also about recognizing that reading isn't always about absorbing every single word. Sometimes you need to skim or scan for specific information.
Right.
And that's where techniques like keyword spotting and previewing come in.
That makes sense. It's like choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
Sometimes you need a scalpel, sometimes you need a hammer.
Perfect analogy.
Okay.
Okay, so now once you've mastered the art of taking in information effectively,
Right?
the next step is to make sure that it sticks.
Ah, so that's where the memory techniques come in.
Exactly. And Buzan offers just a treasure trove of strategies.
Oh.
He delves into these fascinating concepts like the primacy and the recency effects.
Primacy and recency effects.
Have you heard of these?
I can't say that I have.
Okay, so these effects essentially mean that we tend to remember things best at the beginning and the end of a learning session.
Really?
Yes.
So that's why those shorter focused study sessions we talked about earlier
Yes.
are so important.
Exactly.
Because if you overload your brain with too much information at once, nothing really sticks.
Nothing sticks.
Yeah.
You're more likely to remember the first few things than the last few things that you learn.
Interesting.
He also explains why connecting ideas and making associations helps with recall.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely experienced that. When I can relate new information to something I already know, it just seems to click.
Exactly. Our brains love patterns and connections.
Okay.
He also points out that making things stand out, making them unique or even bizarre, can aid memory.
Okay, so if I want to remember to pick up milk at the grocery store, I should picture a giant carton of milk doing a tap dance.
That might work. The point is to make it memorable.
Okay.
He even introduces specific mnemonic systems for remembering lists and sequences,
Okay.
like the number shape system and the number rhyme system.
Okay, now those sound like some serious memory hacks.
They are.
Tell me more about those.
So the number shape system involves associating each number from 1 to 10 with a distinct image.
Okay.
For example, 1 could be a candle,
Uh-huh.
2 could be a swan, 3 a heart, and so on. The key is to choose images that are visually striking and easy for you to remember.
So it's like creating a visual code for numbers.
Exactly. Then when you need to remember a list, you simply associate each item on the list with its corresponding number shape.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say you need to remember a grocery list.
Okay.
Milk, eggs, bread, cheese, and bananas.
All right, got it.
Okay, so you could imagine a carton of milk balancing precariously on top of a candle.
Okay, 1 for milk,
Right. Then a swan laying a giant egg.
2 for eggs.
Exactly. For bread, you might picture a loaf of bread shaped like a heart.
Okay, 3 for bread.
You got it.
You get the idea.
Wow. That's actually pretty clever.
Yeah.
By creating these like bizarre images,
Yes.
you're making the information more memorable. It's like giving your brain something interesting to latch onto.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to remember things that are unusual or out of the ordinary.
So the sillier the image, the better.
Pretty much. And the number rhyme system works in a similar way. But instead of shapes, you use rhyming words.
Okay.
So, for example, 1 is bun,
Okay.
2 is shoe, 3 is tree, and so on.
Okay, I could see how that would be helpful for remembering things in order.
It is. And these mnemonic systems are just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, wow.
Buzan's book is packed with even more memory techniques. But one of his most powerful and arguably most famous is the concept of mind mapping.
Mind mapping. Now, those I have heard of.
Yeah.
They're basically visual representations of information, right? That's right. But there's so much more to it than just drawing pretty pictures. Buzan actually describes mind maps as the Swiss Army knife of the brain.
Wow. Okay, that sounds like a bold claim.
It is. He's not exaggerating.
So why are mind maps so powerful?
Well, for starters, they mirror how our brains naturally process information. It all comes down to a concept called radiant thinking.
Radiant thinking.
Yes. Have you heard of this?
I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay, so it's the idea that our thoughts don't flow in these straight lines, like text on a page. Instead, they branch out in all directions
Okay.
from a central idea, much like the branches of a tree reaching out to the sky, or the intricate web of a spider web.
Oh, okay. Now I'm starting to get the visual. So mind maps are essentially visual representations of that radiant thinking process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because they're visual, they engage more of our brain, making it easier to process, understand, and remember information.
It makes it easier for the brain to grasp.
Think of it like this. When you read a textbook,
Yeah.
you're essentially feeding your brain a diet of dry, linear text.
Okay.
But when you create a mind map, you're giving your brain a visual feast.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So it's not just about words on a page.
Right.
It's about engaging different parts of your brain through colors, images, and spatial relationships.
Precisely. And mind maps use key words and key images to capture the essence of information.
Okay.
Those are the main points and visuals that really jump out at you.
Gotcha. So walk us through how to actually create a mind map.
Okay.
Where do you even begin?
You start with a blank sheet of paper, turn sideways,
Okay. Landscape mode.
landscape mode.
Yes.
So you have plenty of space. Then in the very center of the page, you draw a central image
Okay.
that represents the main topic or idea you're mind mapping.
So if I'm mind mapping a chapter in a textbook,
Uh-huh.
the central image might be a picture of the main concept.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or if you're brainstorming ideas for a project,
Mhm.
the central image might be a light bulb to represent creativity.
Oh, I love that. It's like setting the stage for your thoughts to unfold.
Precisely. And then radiating out from that central image, you draw branches,
Okay.
thick curved lines
Okay.
that represent the main subtopics or ideas.
So each branch is like a main category branching off the central theme.
Exactly. And on each branch, you write a key word or short phrase
Okay.
that summarizes that subtopic. Buzan emphasizes using only one key word per line.
Oh, I can see how that would force you to be concise and really distill the essence of the information.
Exactly. It also helps to keep the mind map visually clear and easy to read.
Mm-hmm.
Then from each of those main branches,
Yeah.
you can draw thinner branches that represent sub-subtopics, or supporting details.
So you're creating like a hierarchy of information with the most important points branching out from the center,
Uh-huh.
and then the supporting details branching out from there.
Exactly. And what's great about mind maps is that they're incredibly flexible. You can keep adding branches and sub-branches as you go. And you can even use different colors, images, symbols, and even little doodles
Oh,
to
fun.
make your mind map more visually appealing and memorable.
So it's not just about words.
Right.
It's about engaging all of your senses to make the information stick.
Exactly. The more you can stimulate your brain
Yeah.
with visuals, colors, and even textures, the better you'll remember the information.
Okay, this is all starting to make so much more sense. So how would you actually apply mind mapping to like your study routine? What are some practical ways to use them?
Well, the possibilities are endless.
Okay.
You could use mind maps to take notes during lectures
Okay.
or while reading textbooks.
So instead of trying to write down every word the professor says,
Right.
you could be capturing the key points and connections in a mind map.
Exactly. And then you could review your mind map later to solidify your understanding.
Okay.
It's a much more engaging and effective way to learn
Yeah,
than staring at pages of linear notes.
definitely. And it seems like mind maps would be incredibly helpful for like brainstorming ideas for essays or presentations.
Absolutely. You'd start with your central topic in the middle of the map and then branch out to all your possible arguments, your evidence, your examples.
Right.
And you could easily rearrange the branches
Oh,
to create a logical flow for your writing or presentation.
that's brilliant. I can already see how mind mapping would make like the whole writing process less intimidating.
It does, because you're not starting with a blank page.
Yeah.
You have a visual framework to guide your thoughts.
Okay, so we've talked about using mind maps for note-taking and brainstorming.
Mm-hmm.
But Buzan takes it even further, right?
He does.
He shows how to use mind maps for every step of the BOST process.
That's right. You can create mini mind maps for each of the 8 steps.
Wow.
Browse time and amount 5-minute mind map, and so on.
So each step of BOST gets its own mind map.
Yes. It's like creating a visual roadmap of your understanding,
Okay.
highlighting the key points and connections at each stage.
And it allows you to really see how the different steps relate to each other.
Exactly. And once you've worked through all the steps of BOST,
Yeah.
you end up with this incredibly detailed and visually engaging mind map that captures everything you've learned.
It's like the ultimate study guide.
It is.
And because it's visual and engaging,
Yeah,
you're much more likely to actually review it and remember the information.
exactly.
This is blowing my mind.
I know, right?
I can't believe I've been missing out on the power of mind mapping for so long. I've always seen them as something that like creative people do,
Yeah.
but never really considered them as like a practical study tool.
Well, you're not alone.
No.
Most people are never taught how to use mind maps effectively, which is a shame because they can be incredibly powerful for learning and thinking.
I'm definitely convinced I'm going to start incorporating mind mapping into my study routine right away.
I think you'll be amazed by the results. And don't forget about the power of study groups.
Oh, right. We talked about group mind mapping earlier.
Yes. Imagine a group of students gathered around a table, each creating their own mind maps of a shared topic. They can compare their maps, share their insights, and fill in any gaps in their understanding.
It's like turning studying into a collaborative game,
Exactly.
which makes it much more fun and engaging.
Yes. And speaking of games, Buzan actually introduces some really cool memory games and techniques in his book.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Tell me more about those.
Okay, so
Yeah, so we talked about mind maps and these cool memory systems like the number sheep system, but honestly, I still struggle to remember things sometimes, you know? Are there other strategies that can help with that?
absolutely. Buzan dives into a whole variety of memory boosting techniques. And a lot of them have to do with understanding how our brains naturally store and retrieve information.
Okay.
One key principle is the power of association.
Association, like connecting new information to something I already know.
Exactly. When you can create those meaningful connections between new concepts and your existing knowledge, those new concepts are much more likely to stick. It's like building a mental bridge between the familiar and the unfamiliar.
That makes sense. It's like when I first learned about the concept of flow state in psychology, I immediately connected it to like my experience of getting completely absorbed in playing music. And that connection made the concept so much easier to understand and remember.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
You created a personal association that made that abstract concept more concrete and relatable.
Yeah.
And Buzan encourages us to get creative with our associations.
Okay.
He says, the more vivid, unusual, or even humorous the connection, the more likely you are to remember it.
So if I'm trying to remember the definition of photosynthesis, I could imagine a plant wearing sunglasses and taking a selfie.
That would certainly be memorable.
Yeah.
The point is to make the information stand out in your mind.
Okay.
Another powerful technique is visualization.
Visualization, like creating mental images of what I'm trying to learn.
Exactly. Our brains are incredibly visual organs.
Yeah.
And when we can create those vivid mental pictures of concepts, they're much more likely to be encoded into our long-term memory. Think of it like creating a mental movie of the information.
So instead of just reading about the Battle of Hastings, I should try to imagine the scene, the clashing swords, the Norman archers, the terrified Saxons.
Exactly. Engage all your senses. Imagine the sounds, the smells, the emotions of the battle.
Right.
The more vivid the image, the stronger the memory.
That's a really cool way to think about learning. It's like turning history lessons into interactive movies.
And speaking of making learning interactive, Buzan is a huge advocate for using all 5 of your senses when you study.
Okay. So we've covered sight and sound with visualization and creating mental movies.
Right.
How do the other senses come into play?
Well, touch is incredibly powerful. Studies have shown that we remember things better when we physically interact with them. So if you're studying a diagram, don't just look at it, trace it with your finger. Draw it yourself, even try to build a model of it.
So it's about getting hands-on with the material.
Exactly. And smell can also be a potent memory trigger. Certain scents can evoke vivid memories and emotions. You might try using essential oils or scented candles while you study to create an olfactory association with the material.
That's fascinating. So if I'm studying for a biology exam, I could diffuse some rosemary oil, which is known to enhance memory and focus.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And while taste might not always be directly applicable to studying, the principle of multisensory learning still applies. The more senses you can engage, the more memorable the information will be.
So if I'm studying different types of rocks for a geology class, maybe I could try eating different types of food that have similar textures or colors,
Okay.
like a crunchy pretzel for granite or a smooth piece of chocolate for obsidian.
That's a great example. Might sound silly, but the point is to create those unique and memorable associations that will help the information stick.
I love that. It's like turning studying into a multisensory adventure. And speaking of adventure, one of the things that really stood out to me in Buzan's book was his emphasis on the importance of fun and enjoyment in the learning process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He firmly believed that learning should be a joyful and engaging experience, not a chore.
I think that's where a lot of traditional study methods go wrong. They focus so much on rote memorization and drilling facts
Yeah.
that they suck all the joy out of learning.
Exactly. Buzan argues that when we're engaged and enjoying ourselves, our brains are much more receptive to new information.
Mm.
He encourages us to find ways to make studying playful and to incorporate elements of fun and creativity into our study routines.
So instead of just sitting at my desk with a textbook, I could try turning my notes into a song, or creating a board game about the concepts I'm learning, or even acting out historical events with friends.
Exactly. The possibilities are endless. The key is to find what works for you and to make studying an experience that you actually look forward to.
That's such a refreshing perspective. I think that's one of the most valuable takeaways from Buzan's work. This idea that learning doesn't have to be a struggle.
Right.
It can be an exciting journey of discovery.
Precisely. And speaking of discovery, another key principle that Buzan emphasizes is the importance of curiosity.
Curiosity, isn't that something we're all born with? I feel like kids are naturally curious about the world around them.
That's true.
Hmm.
But as we get older, we often lose touch with that innate sense of wonder. We get bogged down in routines and responsibilities, and we forget to ask questions and explore new ideas.
I know I'm guilty of that. I get so caught up in my to-do list that I forget to make time for learning and exploring just for the fun of it.
That's understandable. But Buzan reminds us that curiosity is essential for effective learning. When we're curious about something, our brains are more engaged and alert, and we're much more likely to retain the information.
So how do we rekindle that sense of curiosity? Any tips?
One way is to start asking more questions.
Okay.
Don't just passively absorb information challenge assumptions. Dig deeper. Explore different perspectives.
So instead of just accepting a textbook definition at face value,
Right.
I could try to come up with my own explanation or think about how that concept applies to my own life.
Exactly. Another way to cultivate curiosity is to expose yourself to new ideas and experiences. Read books and articles outside your usual interests. Attend lectures and workshops on unfamiliar topics. Travel to new places. Talk to people with different backgrounds and perspectives.
So it's about expanding your horizons and stretching your comfort zone.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to embrace the unknown. Some of the most profound learning experiences happen when we step outside our familiar territories and venture into uncharted waters.
That's a great reminder. I think sometimes we get so focused on finding the right answer or the best solution that we forget to embrace the journey of exploration and discovery.
Exactly. And Buzan encourages us to approach learning with a playful, experimental mindset. Don't be afraid to try new things, make mistakes, and learn from your experiences.
That's such a liberating way to think about learning. It takes the pressure off having to be perfect and allows us to embrace the process of growth and discovery.
Precisely. And remember, learning is a lifelong adventure. There's always something new to discover. And the more curious we are, the richer and more fulfilling that journey will be.
I love that. So, we've covered a lot of ground here, from mind maps and memory techniques to multisensory learning and the importance of curiosity. But there's one more technique from Buzan's book that I'd love to explore: the concept of creative pauses.
Ah, yes. Creative pauses. They're a fascinating and often overlooked aspect of the learning process.
Okay?
They're those moments of stillness and reflection
Yeah.
that we often try to avoid.
Uh,
But Buzan argues that they're actually essential for creativity and insight.
okay, explain that to me. I'm used to thinking of pauses as distractions or wasted time. How can they be beneficial for learning?
Well, our brains are constantly bombarded with information and stimulation.
Yes.
We're always on the go, always processing, always doing.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
It is. And while this constant activity is necessary for survival, it can also lead to mental fatigue and burnout.
I know that feeling all too well. Sometimes my brain feels like it's running a marathon without a finish line.
Exactly. And that's where creative pauses come in. They're those moments when we consciously step away from the constant mental chatter and allow our minds to rest and recharge.
So it's like hitting the pause button on our brains.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we do this, something magical happens. Our subconscious minds continue to work on the problems and ideas we've been grappling with, making connections and generating insights that we might not have been able to access in our conscious body state.
So it's like giving our brains some downtime
Yes,
to process and synthesize all the information we've been taking in.
precisely. And these insights often emerge in unexpected ways. During a walk in nature, while
Yeah.
taking a shower, or even in the middle of the night.
I've definitely had those aha moments when I'm least expecting them. It's like a solution suddenly pops into my head out of nowhere.
Exactly. And that's the power of creative pauses. They allow our subconscious minds to work their magic and to come up with those fresh perspectives and innovative solutions.
So how do we actually incorporate creative pauses into our lives? Do we need to meditate for hours or go on silent retreats?
It doesn't have to be that extreme.
Oh,
Simple activities like taking a walk in nature, listening to calming music, or spending time in quiet contemplation can all be effective forms of creative pausing. The key is to find what works for you and to make it a regular practice.
so instead of feeling guilty about taking breaks, we should embrace them as essential parts of the learning process.
Exactly. Creative pauses are not a luxury. They're a necessity for optimal brain function and creative thinking.
That's a game changer. I'm definitely going to be more intentional about incorporating creative pauses into my day. What other insights does Buzan offer about maximizing our brain power?
Well, he dives into the fascinating world of sleep and dreams.
Sleep and dreams. I thought we were talking about studying, not napping.
It might seem counterintuitive, but sleep plays a crucial role in learning and memory consolidation. When we sleep, our brains are busy processing the information we've taken in during the day, strengthening neural connections and transferring information from short-term to long-term memory.
So that's why pulling all-nighters before exams is actually counterproductive.
Exactly. You're depriving your brain of the essential downtime it needs to process and consolidate information. Buzan emphasizes the importance of getting enough sleep, ideally 7 to 8 hours per night, to optimize learning and cognitive function.
Okay, I'm definitely guilty of not getting enough sleep. I always feel like there's not enough time in the day to get everything done, so sleep is usually the first thing to go. But maybe I need to rethink my priorities.
It's definitely worth considering. And it's not just about the quantity of sleep, but also the quality.
What does that mean?
Well, there are different stages of sleep, each with its own unique function. Deep sleep, for example, is essential for physical restoration and memory consolidation. REM sleep, on the other hand, is associated with dreaming and plays a role in emotional processing and creativity.
So if I'm not getting enough deep sleep or REM sleep, it could be impacting my learning and creativity.
Absolutely. Kazan offers a range of tips for improving sleep quality, such as creating a relaxing bedtime routine, avoiding caffeine and alcohol before bed, and ensuring your bedroom is dark, quiet, and cool.
Those are all great tips. I'm definitely going to try incorporating them into my routine. What about dreams? What role do they play in learning?
Dreams have fascinated humans for centuries, and there's still much we don't understand about them. But Buzan believes that dreams can be a valuable tool for problem-solving, creativity, and even memory enhancement.
Really? How so?
Well, during REM sleep, our brains are incredibly active, making connections and processing emotions in ways that are often inaccessible to our conscious minds. And sometimes these subconscious processes can lead to breakthroughs in thinking or creative insights.
So those bizarre and seemingly nonsensical dreams could actually be our brains working on problems in the background.
Exactly. And Buzan suggests that we can even train ourselves to use dreams for problem solving and creative exploration.
Wait, how do you train your dreams?
Well, one technique is called dream incubation.
Dream incubation.
Yes, which involves focusing on a specific problem or question before you go to sleep, and then keeping a dream journal by your bed to record any relevant dreams you have.
So if I'm struggling to come up with a concept for a painting, I could write down my creative block in my dream journal before I go to sleep. And maybe my subconscious mind will offer some inspiration while I'm dreaming.
Exactly. It might sound a bit far-fetched, but many artists and scientists have reported having creative breakthroughs through their dreams.
That's fascinating. I'm definitely going to give dream incubation a try. It's amazing to think that our brains are still working and learning even when we're asleep.
Exactly. Our brains are incredibly complex and powerful organs, and there's still so much we're learning about how they work.
It's like we have these incredible supercomputers in our heads,
Okay.
and we're only just beginning to tap into their full potential.
Precisely. And Buzan's work is all about helping us to become more aware of our mental capabilities and to use our brains more effectively.
So it's not just about learning specific study skills.
Right.
It's about developing a whole new mindset towards learning and personal growth.
Exactly. It's about embracing the power of our minds and realizing that we're capable of much more than we often give ourselves credit for.
But I love that. It's so empowering to think that we have the ability to shape our own brains and to continuously expand our cognitive abilities.
Precisely. And speaking of expanding our abilities, there's one more fascinating concept from Buzan's book that I'd love to discuss. The idea of mental literacy.
Mental literacy, what does that mean? Mental literacy, what does that
And
mean?
it sounds intriguing, right?
Yeah.
It's like being fluent in the language of your own mind.
Okay.
Buzan describes mental literacy as the ability to really understand and use your mental faculties effectively.
So it's not just about being intelligent, but about knowing how to use your intelligence in practical ways?
Exactly. It's about developing that self-awareness of your mental strengths and weaknesses
Yeah.
and learning how to leverage your cognitive abilities to actually achieve your goals.
So someone could be incredibly brilliant, in a specific area, but lack mental literacy in terms of applying that brilliance in the real world.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And mental literacy encompasses a whole range of skills, including critical thinking, problem-solving, creativity, communication, and emotional intelligence.
It sounds like a holistic approach to brain power.
It is.
It's not just about memorizing facts, but about understanding how to think effectively and navigate the complexities of life.
Exactly. And Buzan argues that mental literacy is becoming increasingly important in our rapidly changing world.
Yeah, it seems that way.
We're constantly bombarded with information and faced with these complex challenges that require us to think critically, adapt quickly, and innovate constantly.
It's not enough to just be a walking encyclopedia anymore.
Right.
We need to be able to process information, make connections, and come up with creative solutions to problems.
Exactly. And Buzan offers a whole range of tools and techniques for developing mental literacy, many of which we've already discussed.
Yeah.
Mind mapping memory techniques, speed reading, multisensory learning, and creative pausing.
So it's about integrating all these different skills into a comprehensive approach to brain power.
Exactly. And it's an ongoing journey, not a destination. Mental literacy is something we can continue to develop and refine throughout our lives.
That's encouraging. It means we're not stuck with the mental abilities we're born with.
Right.
We can actively shape our own brains and expand our cognitive potential.
Precisely. And Buzan's work offers a roadmap for that journey of self-discovery and mental empowerment.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of how my brain works and how to use it more effectively.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Buzan's Buzan Study Skills Handbook is packed with even more insights and practical techniques. Consider this deep dive your springboard to further exploration.
I definitely will. And for our listeners out there, if you're ready to unlock your study superpowers and embrace the power of your mind, Tony Buzan's work is a must explore.
It's a journey that could transform not just your study habits, but your entire approach to learning in life.
So happy learning, everyone, and may your brains be forever buzzing with new ideas and insights.